One of the first things I saw on 9/11, actually film-wise, and by the way, the intro of the show tonight, clips from World Trade Center, the Oliver Stone movie, and a documentary on HBO called In Memoriam that Giuliani kind of spearheaded. Those were the two film-related clips in the intro. But one of the first things I saw was something called Telling Nicholas or something. It was the child's mother. He was like 6 or 7, maybe younger, died in the towers, and somehow there were cameras with them that day as it was happening, all week, where they tried to reach the decision of how to tell the son that his mother wasn't coming back. Talk about incredibly wrenching. But also, you kind of felt, felt the need to experience the pain in some small measure from those that experienced it firsthand. You know, you owed it to really understand the consequences of that day. And I think the 9/11 films and documentaries that have been made, the ones that are best, really give you that sense. I mean, they're not, as you say, and you're quite right, they're not pornographic in nature. They're respectful,
right,
but also very respectful in their kind of solemn telling of that day. But what interested me too was actually, what was the first movie? Was 25th Hour? That was really the first movie that depicted that post 9/11 sensibility, didn't it?
I'd say so.
I would have to say so, because that's December of 2002, and I think that was the earliest movie I can think of, unless there's something else. But the earliest,
certainly the earliest narrative film.
Yeah,
right. And what Spike Lee did there, I mean, it was never intended to be a 9/11 film because it had been planned prior to that event, but it was always intended to be a New York film.
Oh yeah, well, that's like the book. Yeah, I mean, the book is so. And
a lot of people consider 25th Hour one of the great New York films. That and Dog Day Afternoon and the like. It's a great New York film. But what 25th Hour does, it's about a guy, Edward Norton, who's this drug dealer who's finally going to prison. He's been nabbed, and he's got one last night with his friends before he goes to jail, and he's petrified of going to jail, to prison. And so there's this sense they're in the 9/11 environment in New York. You see the ground zero. There's this sense of loss, of regret, of just anger and disillusionment, and it's all there, and just deep sorrow. So it's in the character of the movie, almost indefinable. They don't have to be explicit with it. It's there.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, you see ground zero, but even when you see ground zero, don't you just see it like through a window that he and Philip Seymour Hoffman are standing in front of, and that's about as close as they get to actually referring to it,
outside of the opening credits,
right,
outside of the opening credits, of course, yes.
But there's also something of, at the end of it, he's asking a favor of his friends to beat the hell out of him, to make him ugly before he goes to prison, so he has less of a chance of being screwed with. And I just got a sense that that people were in a different place post 9/11. They had been faced with this ugly horror, and they weren't prepared for it. And in a sense, they needed to understand that mentality so they could fight it. I mean, that's a roundabout way of relating the two.
It's also a very common trait in Edward Norton's career and his three great roles up to that point: 25th Hour, American History X, and Fight Club, all very battered, self-abusive characters.
Right.
So I mean, it's that, but it's also you could take it that Monty Brogan, the character he plays in 25th Hour, that's really a metaphor. he's a metaphor for America, really, being the bruised, the beaten up. To I need this so I can survive. It's like you could look at it that way. I need this so I can survive in prison, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like America itself to survive. God, we were so lucky for so long, and so because we had the oceans to protect us and everything, and then our own things were turned against us 10 years ago. So
it's my favorite Spike Lee movie.
I think I would have to agree with you.
It was my number one movie of the past decade on the list that we did, in 2000, early this year.
Right.
Or early 2010. Is that a part of
2010?
That's the new decade.
Yeah, we started January 2010, I believe.
Yeah, I'm not good at math, but either way.
It's definitely a decade-defining movie, I think, too. Like, it's just... it's kind of grown into something that just says it all about this particular time that we're living in.
It is a time capsule movie. I mean, a couple of movies really go outside of the demands of the script and really allow real life to breathe into it, and that period of time where they're shooting.
Right.
Where you get a sense of the life of the actual production outside of the script on the page. There are a couple of movies like that. I mean, Apocalypse Now is like that.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, all the problems that they had on that film, all the chaos, that's in the film. You can feel it. And it's the same thing with 25th Hour. But the first, and there's a lot of TV stuff, too. And there was... I can't bring my switchboard up, so I wanted to play this clip, but I can't do it. I think it was CBS. They're replaying it again tonight in like a revised 10th anniversary edition. They did a 9/11 documentary, a 2-hour documentary, 6 months after 9/11. And it was actually a project where two French brothers
I remember
were shooting a documentary about a rookie firefighter. And so they were following him around for months. And in that period of time, 9/11 happened. So they actually went into the tower that was hit first with their cameras. They captured everything.
They're actually the only people that actually captured the second plane going into the tower.
That's right. I remember that was a big deal back then.
They're the only ones that got that footage. And I think it was done for ABC, actually, and they ended up winning a few Emmys for
that's CBS. So they're replaying
it on
CBS. CBS? Okay.
It plays again tonight at 8.
Okay.
But they got the first plane, right?
So they got the first plane. Okay.
Yes, because they were testing. They were shooting some routine tests on the street. They're looking at they're looking at a pothole or something, and they hear this roar, and then they veer their camera up, and it's quite a movie, and quite an emotional movie, and a real tribute to the firefighters and first responders and police that were there that day and killed that day.
Yeah.
So I mean, television right out of the gate, they came out with something strong. Did any of you guys see the first mini-series, The Path to 9/11, the Harvey Keitel thing?
No, I never watched that. I never got a chance to see that.
I was warned off of that by just the political bent of it. So I kind of stayed away from it intentionally. I know
Harvey Keitel wasn't pleased with it.
No, he was. I remember reading that.
What did he have to say about it?
I think he just thought they went in the wrong direction with it. I don't remember the exact quote, but he expressed his displeasure with the whole thing.
Didn't he do that like before the movie actually aired or something? And that's I think that's the reason that I stayed away from it. Actually, did you watch it?
Well, and I never saw it. I never really saw any of those made-for-TV movies. I mean, I'd watch the documentaries and stuff, but I mean, I know Showtime had their Time of Crisis movie, where what's his name played Bush, the guy that played him in the comedy series.
Oh, Timothy Bottoms.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, I do. I vaguely remember that. Okay.
Speaking of Apocalypse Now, Timothy Bottoms. And I could tell that was a big joke just from the previews of it. So, but movies that actually portrayed the event, because there's countless movies that portray the aftermath and the wars and everything that resulted from it, and kind of politicized it. But the actual event, I mean, United 93 was the big one. That was 2006, wasn't it? 2006.
Yeah, that was 2006, and then later on that in the summer, the end of the summer, World Trade Center comes out. So those are the two biggies.
Mm-hmm.
And United 93, that's also one of my favorite movies of the past decade, and I think the best movie ever made about the events of that day. And was an interesting experience watching it in the theater opening weekend, because nobody really. It was a packed house, and it was just a palpable sense nobody wanted to see it, but they felt they had to. They needed this, so we all, 400 of us in this theater. Everybody was quiet. Everybody was kind of like shaking. You could tell, and nervous, and at the end when the passengers fight back, they were standing up and they were cheering. It was this big group event, and we were all feeling the same thing. And it was sad, yes, but it was also cathartic in a way that film was.
That's true.
Film was very unique in the way it was made. I mean, Paul Greengrass directed it.
That movie just blows me away. I just have to speak up about United 93 for a second. The editing, the sound work, the way that the dialogue is portrayed, the way that they have the actual participants. I mean, almost everybody you see on the screen, except for, of course, the people who are, on the plane.
Right.
But almost everybody else that you see on the screen are actually playing themselves, including. I'm looking up his name right now, including the head of the FCC or whatever, and
the FAA,
the sort of older guy that's
right. I know who you're talking about.
Trying to make sense of it all. That's a really good performance. I mean, and people say, "Oh, well, he's just playing himself or whatever." It's not quite that way.
Yeah, exactly. It's not that easy. It's not that easy.
You know what? Playing yourself has to be the hardest thing to play.
Yeah,
I would think so. I would definitely think so.
It's an incredible movie.
That's his name. Ben Sliney.
It's told in real time, and you get a sense of the confusion and the chaos of that day. Obviously, we don't know exactly what everyone said on the flight.
Right.
We only know from the communications and the phone calls and such from the flight what was the events that happened on the plane. But I mean, nothing's enhanced. Nothing's made movie-ish. I mean, really, this is such a dramatic event, you don't need to movie-fy it.
Right.
If you know what I mean.
Well, that's one of the things that was said about the event. It seemed like watching the planes crashing, but it was like something out of it. Everyone kept saying a Hollywood movie. That was the analogy that was used over and over again. They thought they were watching something in a Hollywood blockbuster, summer blockbuster. That's I think that says something right there about our culture and everything and how we perceive things, is that we thought, wow, that's what it's like. I always found that to be an interesting answer when people would say that.
And I know a lot of people didn't like the idea of a movie being made about the events. It was the whole we're not ready kind of argument. But those that did see it and were ready to, it was entirely rewarding. But that movie will always be there, and that movie's going to survive.
Oh yeah, I mean, I remember I remember the weekend that it opened. I was in Ohio with some friends of mine, and we always go to see movies. And so I said, well, it wasn't a very good time. It was released in the spring or whatever, so it's not. Spring's usually not a great time for movies. And at a 25 theater multiplex. This was the best thing, most interesting thing that was playing. I tried to get them all to go and see it, and they just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So I ended up watching it on video. And watching it on video was actually, I mean, I can't even imagine what it would have been like watching it in the theater, because even watching it on video, I mean, this is a movie that makes your heart pound out of your chest. It is so ridiculously puts you right there in it. For me, this is one of the most defining movies of the decade.
No, I agree.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt.
And regardless what you think of the movie, Passion of the Christ, there are two films that I've seen that have had on opening day, that have had the most amazing audience reactions.
Oh, yeah.
It was like so palpable.
Yeah, I mean,
United 93 was one, and Passion of the Christ was the other.
I have never been to a movie, Passion of the Christ. I went to the first showing that morning on Ash Wednesday, and I mean, everyone was crying. I mean, everyone. I mean, there was not a draw. I mean, everyone was just weeping at the end of the movie. I've never seen anything like that. It was definitely, it's a fantastic movie-going experience, regardless of what you think of the film. There's no denying the power of what you're watching, and it is very powerful.
Well, it was the same palpable sense I got at United 93. Like people just bracing themselves when it started, not wanting to lose it. Even watching the previews in the theaters, and you heard this like collective sigh when they first said United 93 on the trailer. Like, oh God, I don't know if I could do that. And some people were upset that they did it to begin with. And there was, and you're right, Jerry. A couple of months later, August, I think, World Trade Center came out. Oliver Stone. Now, you had one movie in mind. What kind of 9/11 movie in mind that would come from somebody like Oliver Stone? You didn't get that.
He threw that. He threw us all for a loop with this one. I mean,
he did.
I mean,
he did.
Yeah. When Sean Hannity comes out and starts to brag about the new Oliver Stone movie, it's not what
it's a different movie. And it was a sign of things to come with. I think with Oliver Stone, he definitely. I mean, with W as well, he definitely defeated anyone's expectations of what he was going to do. But World Trade Center is an interesting film. It's not what you think, but it owes a lot, I think, in one sense, to the Rescue Me, which had started 2 years before that, but not as clever and not as good. But it does owe something to that series that just concluded last week. But World Trade Center, obviously it starts off with a lot of momentum, and then it gets lost, I think. I think it does.
Well, it starts on such a grand scale, and you don't. I didn't expect it to recreate that story like in full. It recreated the towers and the scene on the streets that day and everything, and it was odd seeing a recreation of it when you'd seen the real thing. Yeah, and that was so fresh in your mind. It really was, and it was odd, the CGI towers. When they were rising, when they hadn't been hit yet, and you saw them CGI'd. It's just an odd kind of disembodied feel to it.
Right.
And then it shifts gears into something a lot more intimate when it's just the two Port Authority workers trapped underneath the rubble, trying to survive and keep each other alive before they're saved. I mean, the movie, I think the movie's good, and I think it's very respectful. I don't have a problem with it existing. The only thing that I have a problem with is that Oliver Stone did. This isn't like an Oliver Stone movie to me. I've always said, this is a Ron Howard movie. This is not an Oliver Stone movie.
I agree.
Do you think he's mellowed then? Do you just think that
Oliver just
mellowed with this?
Gordon Gekko's a good guy, and he's definitely
we're
mellowed.
This whole trend of almost like this very Coppola-esque trend. Michael Corleone seeking redemption. Gordon Gekko's a good guy.
Yeah, he definitely has mellowed with age. Although, you might make a case that looking at his documentaries on Hugo Chavez and Fidel Castro that maybe he hasn't mellowed with age. So,
I think that's a medium where he's shown the old Oliver Stone again, and his new Showtime miniseries, The Secret History of America, I think.
That's right. That's right. That's coming.
But the bad thing is he doesn't consider himself a documentary filmmaker, but he actually could make waves by pursuing that from now on, because he ain't doing it with his narrative features.
No, I think that era is over.
And I also wonder if that again is because maybe there might be some forces in the executive offices that might not want to bankroll anything that he does that might be too controversial.
Maybe, but there's also the fact that he's older, and he says it's time to pass the baton. I mean, I've taken my share of hits over this kind of stuff, and I've done my duty. I've done my time.
Right.
Let the youth take it over.
Yes.
Also, somebody brought up in the chat room something interesting, and this harkens back to my theater days when 9/11 occurred. And I remember going back to manage the movie theater. I had the opening morning shift on the following Wednesday morning. It was so quiet, like nobody was saying anything. And when we opened the theater, I noticed there was a Muslim man, and he was sitting outside of a theater waiting for it to start to go into the theater. He was sitting out there in the open, and I could see the look on his face, a look of I'm not going to let this scare me or debilitate my life. I'm going out today, this day, in a public place. And I thought that was incredibly brave. I looked at him and I felt a sense of courage from him, and a sense of sadness in a way. But there was also dictates from the studios to the theaters to pull certain things from the theaters.
That's right.
There was a Spider-Man trailer and a Spider-Man poster. The first Spider-Man, the trailer depicted this bank robbery going on. It wasn't in a movie. And Spider-Man catches them in the helicopter and in his web that he connects between the two towers. So the helicopter's floating between the two towers in this big web. That was pulled, as well as the poster that showed Spider-Man and the reflection of the Twin Towers in his eye. A couple other things were pulled. Movies were pulled.
Don't Say a Word was pulled for, I think. And then Training Day didn't they want to postpone that for a little while?
Yeah. Yeah, they postponed this Pacino movie, this People I Know movie, because it had a shot at the end of the World Trade Center. I mean, really, movies and their decisions to pretend almost like the Twin Towers did not exist.
Well, they wanted to go back and digitally erase them out of some movies. I remember it was just it was the wrong. It was actually a precursor of just these oversensitive overreactions. I mean, you shouldn't make they don't. They never existed. That was just a boneheaded move by a lot of people, I thought.
It would be kind of weird in your summer blockbuster Spider-Man, though, to see the Trade Center pop up. But I think that scene was shot for the trailer. I don't think they ever intended to put it actually in the film. I think it was a standalone for the trailer, if I understand.
As it is, I think the last narrative movie to actually include the Twin Towers in its mise en scène or whatever might be AI, artificial intelligence, which actually even in the epilogue to the movie, when the aliens come down and the world is frozen over, you can still see the Twin Towers sticking up out of the ice.
That was the summer before it happened. That was released the summer before.
But what about that James Franco, Robert De Niro movie, City by the Sea? Was that New York or?
Yeah, I'm sure. Okay, I'm sure it was. I mean, you can't if you shoot the skyline at all, and it was pre 9/11. But the first movie post 9/11, there are two movies that actually showed the Twin Towers, and those movies were Gangs of New York and Munich, and both of them occurred in the very last shots of those movies, I think.
I was going to mention the shot in Munich, which I find
it's a famous, infamous shot.
Particularly, that's a great little commentary and an underrated movie.
Oh, it's underrated. Very underrated.
Collateral Damage was delayed.
It should have been delayed, period, indefinitely.
It should still be delayed.
Yeah.
What do you delay my movie for?
Have him call in and talk about that.
Right.
And then Nicholas Vargo also says that Big Trouble was delayed until April.
That's right. And
final third of the
movie. A good funny movie, but that delay, they delayed it till April and everyone forgot about it. But
you know what I do recall though, that they stuck with the release, I think, of Zoolander.
Yes, they did.
Which was like the week after, or the Friday, the following week or something it came out.
I think, yeah.
And that was such a tonic. I mean, because Zoolander is as goofy funny as you can get. I mean, it's stupid funny to the max. And people thought it was even funnier because they needed to laugh together in the theater. I mean,
definitely.
It was great. I mean, it was great that they did that. And actually, the shot showing the silhouette of the plane as it flies into the tower in World Trade Center, when you just hear it and then you see the silhouette of the plane flying by, it flies over the poster of Zoolander in Oliver Stone's movie. If you remember.
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I don't know if that was like unintended laughs coming from the theater in that moment. But yeah, that was good. And you know, I always connect those two, 9/11 and Zoolander, which is really, really odd because Zoolander is as far removed from that as you want to get, and that was the point. That's why people responded.
I think it served a great purpose there. You know, really cathartic. You know, purpose after something like this. So.
Yeah.
We should also talk about War of the Worlds.
Right.
Yeah. Definitely one of the best like post 9/11 movies. I mean, he really captured that feeling, that dread, that uneasiness. I think the first half, I mean, I like the whole movie, but the first half especially, he really captured it very well. I can't disagree with anything in that film in regards to that.
That's the one thing he did best in that movie, actually. I mean, right down from like obviously the haunting stuff, the haunting images of like the freight train that's on fire,
right?
And obviously the masses of people getting incinerated and dust and everything. I mean, it's unmistakable.
And then Tim Robbins enters the movie and slows everything down completely.
Right. Yeah. But you know, and I think a lot of movies they attribute it to 9/11 that aren't deserving, or it's really reaching to say this is what the post 9/11 movie would look like. And a lot of those disaster movies fit that bill because, I mean, whatever that movie is, 2012, that would have been the same movie had they had that technology in the 70s when they were doing Airport and all that other stuff.
It's true.
You know, I don't think that's necessarily informed by 9/11. It's just a way to give more weight to something that doesn't deserve it.
Right.
Know? So there's countless movies like that they say, oh, this is inspired by 9/11 and reflects the different world we live in. No, not really.
Now, those movies, even The Day After Tomorrow, those movies would have been made, I think, regardless of 9/11 or not. I think something like The Happening, though, where M. Night is so late to the game, but he's definitely trying to catch in on that. Let's not forget Danny Boyle's the first zombie movie, sort of, you know, definitely got a lot of these movies, a lot of the zombie movies, though, of that in the post-era sort of do reflect an anxiety about 9/11. And some of them will hit you over the head repeatedly with its subtext, like George Romero. But
yeah.
But I think the first 28 days later, if that's not 28 weeks later, but definitely 28 weeks later, definitely even does it more. But I think that Danny Boyle was trying to go for something with that.
There's also another movie that a lot of listeners, maybe even you guys, might not know of. It comes from a Belgian Well, I think it's actually, I think she's an American filmmaker, but it was financed by Belgium. But it's a movie from 2006 called Day Night, Day Night, and the filmmaker is named Julia Loktev. Mm-hmm. Her second movie is actually, this was her debut film. Her second movie is actually featured in the upcoming New York Film Festival.
Right.
But it's about a 19-year-old Middle Eastern girl who is American Middle Eastern girl who has been chosen to be a suicide bomber in Times Square. And the entire movie takes place over the day before she is set to go into Times Square to set the bomb off, and it follows her very tensely, just walking through crowds and you know, enjoying her last meals and things like that, and it's a very, very tense and brilliant movie. I think one of the great movies of 2006.
I never saw the anthology movie, and I think it's 9/11/01 is what it's called. And I know Sean Penn directed one of the segments, and Ernest Borgnine was his star in it. It was just these world directors. It was like an anthology of something like 7 or 8
yeah, I remember,
short films.
Yeah.
I never did get a chance to see that.
Also, we should pay. There was the Adam Sandler movie.
That's another one that's a good post 9/11. I actually think that's a horribly underrated film.
I haven't
so
seen it.
Actually.
It was too deafening hearing Adam Sandler apologize for those kinds of movies that
yeah, I mean,
I never got to see it.
So now we get Jack and Jill.
I'm sorry. I'll go back and I'll do another Happy Gilmore. I'm sorry. I lost my head.
I really like Adam Sandler when he goes outside of his normal genre, and I think that Reign Over Me is a very, very underrated movie. Mm-hmm. You know, and
very emotional. Very emotional.
Don Cheadle. It's Don Cheadle in it, right?
Yeah, he's wonderful in it too.
Yeah, it's a very good movie.
And there's obviously the documentaries that were made, the most famous of which, I mean, I don't want to talk about the political movies or the movies about the war and stuff
right,
so much.
No, I understand.
But I mean, the elephant in the room is Fahrenheit 9/11. And this is, I've been reading Michael Moore's new autobiography, and the whole first 50 or so pages deals with this story. When he Bowling for Columbine actually is my favorite Michael Moore movie, and the section, the little 3-minute section on 9/11 there, is as haunting to me as anything in Fahrenheit 9/11. But when he accepted the Oscar for that, it's interesting. And he made that speech, and everybody kind of hated him for it afterwards, because he made the speech when we were 4 days into the new war, and there was a lot of support for the war then. And a lot of boos from the audience. I think that Scorsese and Meryl Streep were trying to cheer him on, and Harrison Ford was sitting there laughing.
Right.
But a lot of people were booing. But he said something interesting. What I didn't know: when Oscar winners walk backstage, like when they're carted off the stage, backstage, the first thing they're given is a glass of champagne by one person and a breath mint from another.
Oh.
And he said, I had a bonus. I had a third person walk up to me and scream in my ear, asshole.
Right. Oh, my God.
And he had, I mean, nobody would talk to him at the party, so he left. And he flew back home, and the Homeland Security people were giving him a hard time, and they scraped his Oscar on purpose with their keys.
Right, yeah.
He went home. There was tons of manure, horse manure, on his front porch, so he couldn't go into his house. He had to hire 9 SEALs to protect him because of all the death threats against him.
Right.
And people tried to approach him and slice him. And several times, and the Secret Service would come in and stop them.
Right.
Before they were able to do so. Yeah, it's interesting, the aftermath of that. But at that point, he said, screw it, I'm not hiding. Let's make the last documentary we'll ever make, and that's how Fahrenheit 9/11 came out. The problem for me with Michael Moore is I think he's a great filmmaker in that he makes films that are emotional and that involve you in a human level. My problem with him is how loosey-goosey he is with the facts. And, and when somebody calls him on it, he says, okay, fine, that's wrong, but what about all this stuff? I'm like, no, I mean, if you're making a documentary based on what you think are facts, if one part of it is faulty, the whole thing kind of, swaggers underneath it. I think he gets to the truth, the essence of the truth, without actually telling the truth completely. It's a weird thing.
Better off using, instead of the guy who wrote House of Bush, House of Sod, I think he would have been better off using Kevin Phillips, who was a hardcore Republican and then sort of jumped the fence and wrote a series of books, American Dynasty about the Bushes, and then American Theocracy. He would have been better had he interviewed Kevin Phillips. I think it would have given him the film some real lasting street cred. Because by interviewing this other guy, that guy's facts for that book at the time were put into dispute by a lot of people. And I think I was really surprised he used him because he's prominently interviewed, and I think we need to get rid of Herma123 in the chat room.
For sure.
He's gone.
He's gone. Good. All right. I haven't been in the chat room that much, but that's what I just saw when I got in there. But it's a very emotional, it's a very powerful film. But if you, like you said, it's the facts that he just doesn't get right sometimes, and you know what I mean in the factuality department.
Well, he's really an essayist making movies. That's the thing is he's an essayist. He doesn't hide his own political views on things, and you're right about him fudging. Everything you said about him fudging the facts and stuff is completely correct. But he does get to the heart of things. But my biggest problem with Michael Moore is, I think, just comes with going to see a Michael Moore movie, which is his insertion of himself so much into the movie.
Yeah.
It's
the grandstanding.
It's the grandstanding.
Do you remember a couple of years ago? Manufacturing Dissent came out, which was about him, made by liberal Canadian filmmakers, and they interviewed a lot of documentarians. And the one thing that a lot of other documentarians have, besides being jealous of him, that he can jealous of him, though they all say that he has broken the cardinal rule by putting himself in the film. This is a common thing you hear, a common criticism. And while at a base level I can see, it's bad, that's kind of one of the reasons we like about Michael Moore, because he does break rules, and you need that.
And it's not necessarily a rule that he's broken.
Yeah.
And because Werner Herzog puts himself in a lot of work too.
Use Herzog. I mean, he's all over the place.
Nick Broomfield too is another one who did, Kurt and Courtney and so forth.
And there's another one with the facts. That's another guy that has a lot of trouble with the facts. Every film he does, there's a lot of controversy about him.
What's notable about Fahrenheit 9/11, and what probably speaks to how useful it was, like how much people needed to see something like that at that time. It's the highest-grossing documentary ever.
Right.
I mean, the first one to break $100 million, and it's when they polled people, and the Bush administration did this. They polled people to see what kind of impact the movie had on their chances for re-election. It came in the top 3 reasons why people would not vote for him again, which was the movie. And so it did become like a major movement. I remember walking out of that theater opening night, another movie I saw opening night, and I mean the cops were hauling people away for making disturbances because they were confronting people outside of the theater, saying you deserve to know the truth, don't believe those lies, and that kind of stuff. And actually, I mean, I walked away from the movie. I it didn't really tell me much I didn't already know.
Right.
But I didn't buy it, all of it wholeheartedly, because I knew the source of it. But I thought it was an extremely well-made film, and the part that hit me was the mother of the deceased soldier.
Right.
I mean, that was the human part, and really, beyond all the twisted facts or whatever he presented, that was the most effective point of his movie. That little section.
Right. I agree with that.
Right.
And the flip side of Fahrenheit is No End in Sight, which is a very academic breakdown of the ensuing war after 9/11. You know, it's not emotional. It's talking heads, and so if you want that kind of movie, I mean, they're there. Those movies.
Again, like that filmmaker who later won the Oscar for Inside Job is a very mathematical kind of filmmaker. In fact, he was a mathematical. He's a doctor of mathematics, and so you can see in both of those movies, you know, him trying to add up things almost. You know.
Yeah.
We
talked to him, Charles Ferguson, about Inside Job, which was his new movie, and the No End in Sight filmmaker you're talking about, right?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, he definitely has and Inside Job is a lot more of a kind of a impassioned, confrontational movie than No End in Sight, as I remember.
We should also mention, you know, the truther movement, and there's been a couple of documentaries that you know, whether you want to believe in any of that stuff or not, which I don't necessarily, but you know, but it does bring up like certain questions that I have about the whole everything that happened that day.
Stuff like Loose Change. Is
Loose Change would be the most
Loose Change, one. Yes. Loose Change, and Dylan Avery's Loose Change, and also maybe even Alex Jones's Endgame.
Well, he has a lot out. Jones has so many on InfoWars and all of his sites. I mean, that guy's like the Fassbinder of documentaries, or conspiracy theory documentaries. I mean, he's cranking those things out. I mean, I mean, he's got a lot. Whether you agree with him or not, the guy is prolific.
Yeah. They're interesting movies, you know. You know, if you, it's just interesting to see, you know, some people who still have questions, you know, about, because, you know, I mean, the biggest question that I have about 9/11 is why did some of the buildings fall that had no damage, very little damage at all, including you know, World Trade Center number 7. That's probably the biggest.
Yeah, I remember that last year. People wanted to know that for years. Let me ask you this, though, Dean, because you brought up Dylan Avery, who did Loose Change. What has become of him? I have not seen his name mentioned as much in the last couple of years as, like, at least, you know, it seems that he's disappeared.
It just seems that he keeps recutting the movie. You know, I mean, there's numerous different versions of Loose Change. There's the original Loose Change, and then there's a second edition that came out.
Oh yeah,
he's the George Lucas of documentary filmmakers.
He just keeps going and recutting it. So he's just kind of like this one subject filmmaker. So what's become of him? I don't know. You know, I don't know anything really else about him other than this film. So you know, I don't know. He's going to have to find another subject sooner or later.
Well, I remember he did an article in Vanity Fair when he became very popular on the fringe, you know, beyond the fringe culture. He had actually become very popular, and there were movie deals and everything lined up and everything, and I guess they evaporated.
Yeah.
Well, you know, somebody in the chat room, and Jerry, you mentioned this earlier, Rescue Me. That's the major television.
Yeah.
You know, illumination of 9/11, post 9/11. Do you think that the ending of I hate to mention this movie in the company of these others, but do you think the ending of Remember Me is disrespectful?
Oh God, is it? You know, because they're you know, when you realize where he is, it just seems. I'm not, and this is no offense to the star of the movie because of Twilight or anything, because I actually thought he was very good in Water for Elephants, so that's not that. It just seems like a really cheesy cash-in. I don't know if disrespectful. I just think, we really want to do this right now? This is how you.
The movie's not deserving of that payoff.
Yeah, it doesn't. There's not enough emotional. There should be more emotional investment than there is, but there really isn't. And to have it end like that, you're just like, wow. It actually takes you out of the movie, I think, completely.
Yeah.
It really does.
I did see that movie. Yeah. And I mean,
I haven't seen it, but I don't plan to watch it. But
they aren't missing much. I mean, it's a minor movie, and it's not much to get upset about. But the point of the movie is kind of, the whole thing of cherish what you have and every day and the people that love you and blah, blah, blah. And the way that they really tried to draw that home in the most visceral way at the end was to show the lead character in the World Trade Center building on that day.
Mm-hmm.
So you knew that it was his day had ended, his life had ended.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It didn't belong there. It's like putting,
it's like ending.
It's like ending
Twilight
Sweet
Zone.
Home. It's like ending Sweet Home Alabama with Pearl Harbor. Yeah, it doesn't.
Actually, that's an interesting idea, Jamie.
That would be a good mix-up, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. Let's mix up 2 weeks' notice with Tora.
Yeah,
that would be good.
Just to let you guys know, today on Hulu, I was watching. I watched about an hour of it before the show. I watched a film that's available on Hulu to see for free, called Saint of 9/11.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's about Father Michael Judge, the fire chaplain who was killed that day while
first reported death.
Yeah, exactly. And was killed while giving last rites to someone. That's a very, from what I've seen of it so far, it's by Glenn Holston, and it's quite a moving film, I have to say. It was very interesting.
And an interesting guy.
For sure.
There's also, I forget if it's History Channel or Nat Geo. It's whoever ran the other week the only interview with George Bush about that day. What channel was that? It was an hour conversation with Bush, and he went through that day, and that was the only interview he granted for that. But they have lots of 9/11 programming that they've been playing, and in terms of like TV kind of documentaries, those are the best that I've seen, and it's amazing how they've retraced the steps of the terrorists, every step that day, what hotel they stayed at, what ATM they visited. The conversation they had with the ticket counter guy, they put the ticket counter guy on to talk about it, the stories of the survivors, and I thought this was urban legend, but they interviewed the guy that wrote it down, that was in a higher floor and rode the rubble down and survived.
Wow.
Yeah, amazing. I thought that was just like one of those, urban legends that popped up after that, but
true. Yeah, I definitely see that. Wow.
One of the most interesting TV docs that I've seen, we should talk about this. I don't know who first put it on, but it's an hour-long TV doc called The Falling Man, and it's all about the photograph. The photograph that was taken of the man falling to his death. Trying to determine in that documentary who exactly that man was, and that's quite a moving piece as well.
Yeah, and it's really, I remember Spielberg being interviewed like soon after 9/11, and he said, they asked him, will Hollywood do a movie like this? And he said, no, I don't think it should happen. I mean, I don't think you should make the real life disaster film of that day. And we've still haven't had an all-encompassing movie about that day. There have been snapshots of certain moments in certain locations, but you haven't had like a JFK style movie on that day about that day. Do you think that we will eventually?
Is it necessary? Is it necessary because it was all televised in one sense? It's all I mean, not what would be you would call the melodrama of what was it, but it's in one sense no narrative film is going to be able to recreate. God, I don't know how to really phrase this any better than what we witnessed and what people witnessed in New York, and especially near the Pentagon. And I just don't know if it's necessary, because it's one of these events that was documented live as it was happening.
I get exactly what you're saying, and that's exactly Spielberg's argument. But yeah. I know that no film is necessary necessarily.
Mm-hmm. True. No, true. To an extent, yeah.
And I know that whether it's necessary or not, I mean, if they were inclined to make it, they would. Mm-hmm. If they would make that kind of movie, who would you entrust it to?
Oh God. Boy, I mean, it just seems like, I'm just flashing back to Paul Greengrass, but he would never want to revisit it. But 1993 does it just so right that if you were going to do it any other way, I mean, it just seems like too big of a subject matter, first of all, to contain in even a 4-hour movie, so it would have. I don't see how they could do it unless, I mean, they would only be any kind of movie that takes place that's about history. It's real, or any kind of biopic or anything like that. It's really better if you just take a little sliver of what happened and dramatize that, and that's what's interesting about United 93 and what makes it probably the definitive movie about that day, because it takes a sliver of what happened and shows you everything connected to that sliver. But I just don't think that you could make a movie about it and contain it in any kind of movie kind of shape. You would have to do an AMC or FX or HBO style series to really, because I think if you did, in all seriousness, so if you did a miniseries obviously, but if you did it as a narrative film, I can just see the criticism. You didn't include this. You included this. Why did you do this? You can just. And I'm not saying that's not a reason to do it, because if we did that, nothing would ever get done. But I don't know how the day itself. I don't know how you contain that in 2 to 3 hours.
Right.
I really don't know.
I just don't think you could do it. That said, a name flashed into my mind. If it was going to be done as a series, it might be interesting to see somebody like David Chase or David Simon.
Mm-hmm. Well, who's the ultimate New York director? I mean, especially now that Sidney Lumet has died.
You would want Spike Lee. I mean, Spike Lee or Woody Allen.
Well, what?
And I don't know if you see Woody Allen's now, but he is definitely the ultimate New York. But I don't want Woody Allen doing that. But I mean, Spike Lee would be or Scorsese, one of the two.
Right. I mean, Scorsese's the name that came to me.
Mm-hmm.
But he hasn't touched it either. I mean, in terms of Gangs in New York, that closing shot was Harvey Weinstein's idea. He's the one that fought for that closing shot at the end of that movie. So, I mean, I don't know. There's still more 9/11 movies on the horizon. One this year, the holiday season, that's going to be a major Oscar contender. It's called Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close.
Great book. I'd be curious to see how that translates to screen.
Stephen Daldry directed it. It's about a 9-year-old amateur inventor who searches New York for the lock that matches a mysterious key left by his father when he was killed in the September 11th attack.
Right.
It stars Tom Hanks, Sandra Bullock, Viola Davis, John Goodman, James Gandolfini, Max von Sydow, Jeffrey Wright. Hell of a cast. Written by Eric Roth.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be very curious to see how that translates to screen. I'm very curious.
Shot by Chris Minguez. I mean,
wow.
Yeah.
This is a pedigree movie.
Can't get any better than that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Paramount. It actually releases. I guess it would release maybe in 2 cities on Christmas for Oscar contention.
Yeah.
But it has a release date of.
Score?
It has a release Nico Muhly. It's a composer I know, but I can't tell you what movies he's done. It has a release date of January 20th of next year, but I'm pretty sure, like, the Oscar bait nature of this, it'll come out in a couple of cities in December.
Mm-hmm. Oh, of course. But you got such a busy December, though. You got The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and Mission Impossible 4 opening on the same day. So, I mean, you've got. I mean, I think this December is just, like, booked, like, rock solid. So they're going to do that pedigree, the Oscar thing, I think, for a couple of these. But do you think there's an audience for that movie?
Yeah.
Do you think?
Oh, yeah.
No, because his other book was made into a movie, Everything's Illuminated. Another great book.
Right.
Yeah, a very interesting film.
That didn't star Tom Hanks and Sandra Bullock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this is going to be a very curious film. I mean, it is I think, I'd be very curious to see how this does. It's a very, very, very fascinating book. So I'd be curious.
There's also the movie, I mean, it's dealing with terrorism and the mindset of terrorism, even though it's domestic terrorism. I mean, one of my favorite movies that I've talked about all the time, post 9/11, is the assassination of Richard Nixon. And that really, the thing that moves me about that movie is that it really is a taxi driver for the new age, but in that it shows you what causes someone to snap and become so disillusioned and kind of funnel all of their insecurities and self-hatred and all of that into a twisted kind of cause. And that's what happens to Sean Penn in that movie. And it's a real-life story of a guy that hijacked an airplane and intended to fly it into the White House to kill Richard Nixon. I mean, this really happened in the 70s. And he sent letters to Leonard Bernstein describing his whole plot because he was moved by his music.
Right.
He thought his music represented America and the hope of America that he no longer had in his own life. I mean, he was a loser and he couldn't get ahead. I mean, in any aspect of his life.
Right.
And all of these and he was kind of ill, and so all of these factors converged and made him a radical. You know,
Right.
I think it's a valuable movie and a very emotional one.
It is.
There was also that comedy that came out a few years ago called Four Lions.
I still need to see that. That's supposed to be very good. That got rave reviews.
Yeah, about four newly minted jihadists who are trying to ply their wares and do it very comedically. It is a pretty good movie. Written by the same people who did In the Loop.
Oh yeah.
A few years ago.
So we talk about Uwe Boll's Postal? Probably not.
No, let's leave the dignity in this, please.
Yeah. So I'm sure that we'll see, in the books, let's talk about the other media that's reflected 9/11. Books, I have a few here. 102 Minutes.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably the best one, I think.
Yeah.
The Post has a great, today, books about 9/11, the Washington Post, and there's a lot of great stuff like the aftermath or why, the story behind it, like the looming tower, obviously. There's a lot of them. Imperial Hubris. I mean, they go into great. I mean, there's just, hundreds of books, and actually some of those are actually very good. But there are two really good narrative books I've read in the last couple of years. The Emperor's Children, which takes place before 9/11, a very well-to-do family in New York. And then there's the Jay McInerney's The Good Life, which is definitely about after 9/11. And then there's another book, I forget the author, I read, The Garden of the Last Days, which is actually about the suicide, the pilots, the training while they're training in Florida, and about their lives. And that's a fascinating novel, just crazy. But there's a lot of great novels that have come out dealing with before and after 9/11.
Music, I played some of it at the beginning. The Springsteen album, The Rising.
Mm-hmm.
That's all about 9/11, the different stories of 9/11, as written by, one of our all-time great songwriters. And what's fascinating about that album, The Rising, is that it isn't. It's not a downer. I mean, it's not mournful as much as.
It's optimistic.
Yeah, it's optimistic. I don't want to say celebratory.
No, not so, but it is optimistic, though.
Almost that song, "The Rising," is almost like a chant in a way, you know, like a war cry, or I don't know how to put it. It's a very passionate album, and there are songs on that like "Into the Fire," or "You're Missing," or "Nothing Man" that just slay me. "My City of Ruins" is probably one of the most popular on that song. "Man on Wire." There's also stuff where you watch something like "Man on Wire." No mention at all of 9/11, but obviously it's about a tightrope walker whose ultimate dream when he saw the Twin Towers being constructed was to walk a high wire between those two towers, and he did it. And it plays almost like a thriller because they're trying to sneak in there and go up and hide from the cops and stuff, and this impossible feat. And then he goes up on the wire, and it shows pictures of him in between the two towers, and there's such a sense of peace. And the most moving part of that movie to me is when his girlfriend at the time was watching him from the street below. Everyone was gathered there, amazed. And she started to cry, and this was such a cathartic moment. But she knew that their relationship was over at that point. She had been with him through all of his training up to that point, and she knew that things were different now. The chemistry of both of their lives had changed now that he had accomplished the impossible.
Right.
It's a great movie.
It
I
is.
want to see his new movie about the monkey too. But
yeah, that didn't. I didn't play long here. I was hoping.
Project Nim. Yeah. I wanted to mention two graphic novels that I think are important. There's one called the 9/11 Report, graphic adaptation by Sid Jacobson and Ernie Colon, and it's an incredibly detailed graphic novel depicting everything that led up to the events of that day, and everything that transpired after it, including all the 9/11 Commission report, which it's based on. And if you were going to do a movie of 9/11, I think you'd really have to take a look at this book as kind of a blueprint as to how to do it. The second book that I'd like to mention is by Art Spiegelman, and it's called In the Shadow of the Towers.
I do have. That's a good one.
Is that the title of it? I think
it is. I'd have to go look for it, but I think you're right.
And that's an incredibly personal story of him, because he lives in the neighborhood really, and that's the story of he and his wife, Francois Mouly, trying to figure out where their child is during that day, and also going through all of the ash and the rubble, and he does an amazing job of relating this day to a lot of comics that he's known in his past, things like Little Nemo and things like that. That's a fascinating book.
So there's a lot of media out there. I mean, it's something that we'll be living with for forever. Just like we still discuss Pearl Harbor and the JFK assassination.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just one of those dates of infamy that'll last forever.